The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
The last time that a 2016 Republican presidential candidate was interviewed by the Christian Broadcasting Network, it was Jeb Bush, who indicated that he supports discriminating against gay people based on religious beliefs by business owners. And also he insulted all gay parents, saying the only place for a poor child is with heterosexual parents. So that didn't go too well for Jeb Bush, at least in the non-bigot community. Now it's Marco Rubio's turn. And again, Lewis, it did not go well. This was an interview with Rubio that was published by the exact same Christian Broadcasting Network. In this one, Republican presidential candidate Marco Rubio suggests that pushing to legalize same-sex marriage and gay rights represents a threat to the very survival. It's hard to even say it seriously. A threat to the survival of Christianity. Let's listen to Rubio, again, going the route of the bigot on Christian Broadcasting Network.
Today, his deep faith drives public policy decisions on social issues, like traditional marriage.
We are at the water's edge of the argument that mainstream Christian teaching is hate speech. Because today we've reached the point in our society where if you do not support same-sex marriage, you are labeled a homophobe and a hater. So what's the next step after that? After they've done going after individuals, the next step is to argue that the teachings of mainstream Christianity, the Catechism of the Catholic Church, is hate speech.
Why can't anybody just ask this guy a follow-up, engage Marco Rubio, say, okay, Marco, specifically, how would Joe marrying Jeff threaten Christianity? I mean, tell me specifically, how would it affect your marriage? How would it affect the child? What would it make them think that would be so bad? Explain what it would do to the banking system. I wish that they were ever followed up with, Lewis, to actually walk us through how gay marriage is an existential threat to Christianity.
Well, we know what happens when you ask follow-up questions to Marco Rubio. We saw that on Fox when he was trying to answer questions about Iraq.
Yeah, he implodes, giving 10 different answers to 8 different questions.
Yes, and he looked very uncomfortable. It's in their best interest here to make Marco Rubio look good when they're interviewing him.
Yeah, the Christian Broadcasting Network doesn't want to make anti-gay bigotry look illogical, right? They want it to look as logical as possible, and the way to do that is not to follow up. And obviously, Christianity is fine from a legal standpoint. It's the only religion that gets a federal holiday in the U.S. It's the predominant religion in the U.S. by far. Every single president has been some flavor of Christian. Christianity is fine. It just isn't going to be, hopefully, a sort of get-out-of-jail-free card to discriminate. It's only Marco Rubio's narrow brand of Christianity that might be in trouble as people wake up to what is right and moral. The extremist sects of Christianity seem more retrograde, and yes, people will hopefully start to question their involvement with those extremist sects.
I agree. Yeah, if this means that there is a danger to those extreme sects, then I am in favor of that.
And there are thousands of denominations of Christianity. You can find plenty who perform same-sex marriages, as do many Jewish synagogues and other religions. Plus, if all of Marco Rubio's concern around gay marriage law and gay rights is Bible-based, number one, it has no place at all being a factor in the laws that we make as a secular society. And number two, until Marco Rubio argues that we should be stoning adulterers and making divorce illegal, he's just a hypocrite cherry-picking elements of his extremist interpretation of his religion to try to push while ignoring others, and that's something we see all the time.
And I wouldn't be surprised if during his next interview in a different setting, he might have a slightly different answer about this when he's asked about it.
We've been talking about the Josh Duggar anti-gay Christian star child molestation scandal, in which Josh Duggar, the son of Jim Bob and Michelle Duggar, stars of the reality show 19 Kids and Counting, anti-gay crusader, ended up being caught, exposed as a systematic child abuser, including of his own little sisters. It turns out, now we've dug up, that when Jim Bob Duggar, his dad, ran for U.S. Senate back in 2002, his campaign website explained his positions on a variety of issues. He did explain his position on incest, and he called for the death penalty for those caught engaging in incest. That's got to be pretty awkward, Lewis, now that his son Josh molested multiple little girls, including some of his own sisters.
Pretty awkward indeed. I think the whole situation is awkward, as it's already been clear that he basically covered this up, brushed it under the rug, and for all we know, was letting it continue up until that point.
He was asked, what's your position on abortion? And specifically, where do you stand on rape, incest, and threats to the mother's health? He said, quote, if a woman is raped, the rapist should be executed instead of the innocent unborn baby. Adoption is an option. Many couples would love to adopt and are waiting for a baby. Abortion has been and always will be the destruction of an innocent child. Rape and incest represent heinous crimes and as such should be treated as capital crimes. The developing infant committed no crime and should be allowed to live. In the unlikely event that the life of both mother and baby would be lost, all should be done to save the life of the mother. Incest, a capital crime, Lewis. Now, of course, Josh Duggar, thankfully, did not impregnate his sisters, but Jim Bob took a very different approach when dealing with incest committed by Josh. Not only did he not tell the police what happened for a full year, he didn't even send Josh to a trained counselor for treatment, instead sending him to work on some family business elsewhere. So I guess what he meant when he said capital punishment for incest, he meant it for other people. There's a difference between family and other people, of course.
There's always a difference. Now, are you calling this religious extremist a hypocrite?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, then we're in agreement, yes. Of course, it never applies to you or your own family.
In reaction to the child molestation incest fiasco involving anti-gay Christian reality show star Josh Duggar, creationism activist Eric Hovind, who happens to be the son of imprisoned creationist theme park Kent Hovind, creationist theme park creator Kent Hovind, suggested that Josh Duggar be punished for molesting his sleeping sisters and their friends by being paid to campaign against gay marriage. This doesn't make any sense to me. Here's a quote. Since Josh molested girls, which could damage their trust of men, which could damage their future marriage, which could damage their future family, we should make Josh Duggar work the rest of his life to help families stay together and help them recognize how twisted the world is and how God offers instruction on how to live righteously. He should be forced to push faith, family, and freedom in the public, showing the Christian worldview has the answers. We should force him to get a job at the Family Research Council, whose mission is to advance faith, family, and freedom. That was a job he had. He resigned from the Family Research Council, because of this entire scandal.
Yeah, well, if religion was the answer and if religion showed the way, he was raised in an extremely religious house. So how did he end up doing this stuff in the first place?
I'm going to get to that, Lewis. Ray Comfort weighed in on that. But before I get to that, Evan Hovind also said, if evolution is true, then there is no absolute right and wrong. If evolution is true, Josh should not have admitted his faults over a decade ago, because what one evolved bag of molecules does to another bag of molecules just doesn't really matter. If evolution is true, there is no ultimate judge on the bench who will hold every man, woman, and child responsible for their actions. So he's saying if evolution is a real thing, it's not really wrong to molest your little sisters because it's just bags of molecules doing stuff to other bags of molecules. The fallacious argument that we've talked about before, that you can't have morality without religion, a ludicrous argument.
Also the argument that you can't have religion with evolution. But guess that depends on the religion.
Let me comment now on the other thing Lewis mentioned. Another well-known creationist pastor, Ray Comfort, who we've interviewed on the show many times, offered up support for Duggar, saying, quote, on Twitter, standing by my friend Josh Duggar as a brother in Christ. This was in his before Christ days. Such were some of us. Comfort apparently means that Josh Duggar molested family members and friends before he became a Christian. So that's the new line, Lewis. If any Christian molests someone, they weren't Christians at the time. Of course, it's a lie because the bio pages of the Duggar family say that Josh Duggar came to Christ at the age of 7, long before the molestation happened. What does he mean, though, Ray Comfort, by saying such were some of us? Does that mean that Ray Comfort also molested children? I don't even understand that part.
I'm not sure. His use of English is enigmatic, but maybe we can have him back on the show and ask him.
This is not simply a matter of having an opinion. These people are seriously disconnected from reality. Some would argue this is mental illness. I'm terrified for the children that they're raising. All right, increasingly irrelevant Catholic Church officials are calling Ireland's gay marriage decision a defeat for humanity. Ireland became, as we talked about, the first country to legalize gay marriage by popular vote. You all right, Lewis? You look a little tired over there today.
Oh, I'm okay. It was really hot in here and didn't sleep too well. I am kind of tired.
All right. As we talked about, Ireland legalizing gay marriage by popular vote, a referendum, 62% said yes to gay marriage. 84% of that country is Catholic, so certainly very interesting in terms of what it implies for the future of the Catholic Church and what's going on inside of it. And a senior Vatican official has attacked the legalization of gay marriage in Ireland. I was deeply saddened by the result, said Cardinal Pietro Parolin, the Vatican's Secretary of State, essentially considered to be the sort of second most important person who could weigh in on stuff behind the Pope. He went on to say the Church must take account of this reality, but in that sense, it must strengthen its commitment to evangelization. I think that you cannot just talk of a defeat for Christian principles, but of a defeat for humanity. This is the top diplomat of the Catholic Church. When I say increasingly irrelevant, I mean ideologically, right? There are still more than 1 billion Catholics on this planet, but the views on issues are becoming decoupled among Catholics from the Church's official view, and that has to be making the Church's official view less and less relevant.
So why wouldn't the Church, kind of move with the Catholic people in that direction?
That's really the question, right? If as a church you're losing congregants ideologically, they're still on paper Catholics, right? But on the issue of gay marriage, for example, increasingly your congregants don't agree with you. That doesn't bode well for your church long term if you're not willing to change your views. I don't know ultimately what the Catholic Church is going to do on this.
I don't see their recruitment or I don't see that going up. I don't see them gaining more members in the future. I mean, they have to make some changes here.
And that's the real defeat for humanity. Ireland passing gay marriage by popular vote is not a defeat for humanity. The defeat for humanity is the Catholic Church seeing the results of this election. And instead of realizing times are changing, our retrograde morality is antiquated, we should change, they say, no, everybody else is wrong, we're still right. That's really the sad thing here, and hopefully they will change their view on this.
I hope so. I mean, the Pope, we need to hear from the Pope on this one, and my guess is that he would say something probably a little bit different than what this head of church was saying. Let
us know what you think on our Reddit discussion forum, davidpakman.com/Reddit. That's REDDIT.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
If you do any shopping on Amazon.com, please consider going to our website, davidpakman.com, and clicking on the Amazon banner on the right side of the page before you shop. This is a way to redirect a little bit of your purchase away from Amazon and towards the David Pakman Show and supporting independent media. I recommend bookmarking that link. Find the Amazon banner at davidpakman.com. You can also be a David Pakman Show member. Today's new member of the day is David DeMar. David, thank you for being a member of the David Pakman Show. Read about all of the great member benefits and sign up at davidpakman.com/membership. It's time for Hatriot Mail, and I have another great new Hatriot Mail introduction.
It's like a mandatory transvaginal ultrasound for your mind. Hatriot Mail. Written by patriots who hate David Pakman. Because America. And because freedom.
This week's Hatriot has a plan to deal with gay bakeries, not anti-gay bakeries, but with gay bakeries. Let's take a listen. I'm sure it's a brilliant analysis.
Hey, gay boy David. Two can play at this game with your rules. All of us straights are going to go to all of the gay bakeries and businesses and see which ones refuse to serve us. Then put those out of business. I'm praying for judgment.
Yeah, well, first of all, homophobia is not a protected class. So that's number one. And number two, I don't think that there are many gay bakeries that would refuse to serve you on the basis of being heterosexual. Certainly, I've never heard that, Lewis, and it would be a pretty bad business decision since most people are heterosexual.
Yeah, if they're going to refuse to serve you, it's going to be because of your demeanor and the obnoxious things you say when you enter that bakery, not because you are straight. That'd be my guess about how that interaction goes.
Let me remind everybody, we have the Indiegogo campaign, crowdfunding campaign to launch the next step of the David Pakman Show starting early next week. Hatriot Mail Guy, the narrator for Hatriot Mail, is willing to do as perks some voicemail messages. So you can have Hatriot Mail Guy, a world-famous voiceover artist for television and movies, voice over your voicemail message. You can also be the voice of Hatriot Mail. That's another perk that will be available through our Indiegogo campaign. Stay tuned. It launches early next week. Cleveland police have done something really nice, Lewis. They've agreed to stop hitting people on the head with their guns. The Justice Department found a 21-month investigation that began in 2013 that Cleveland police routinely bash people on the head with their guns, sometimes accidentally firing their guns as a result, according to a 58-page report that was released. So as a result of this report, Cleveland police are making some changes. The police are going to stop hitting people on the head with their guns, and they will document any time that their guns are unholstered, according to a new consent decree between the U.S. Justice Department and Cleveland police that was released yesterday. This is the result of 5 months of negotiations, dozens of meetings with community groups. They are now saying that police will expressly provide that policy expressly provides that using a firearm as an impact weapon is never an authorized tactic. The agreement prohibits officers from displaying their firearms unless they believe lethal force to be necessary. This is a very good thing. And as it turns out, Sam Walker, who's a retired criminology professor, this is already standard police tactics in many, many departments. He said, quote, "Many of the things here are long-standing policies in good departments, like hitting people with their guns like a baton. The good departments banned that decades ago." The Cleveland police reports even included, Lewis, a box that could be checked. If you hit someone in the head with your gun, there's a specific box to check for that. Apparently, it's such a routine thing that they say, instead of having to write that out in words, just check this box if you bashed someone over the head with your gun.
Well, as we saw with Eric Garner in New York, just because something is banned doesn't mean that police officers aren't going to do it. Of course, in that case, an officer used a banned technique, which ended up killing a man and somehow got away with it. So yeah. I still predict that there might be some pistol whipping going on in Cleveland.
I actually like that they also discuss how you shouldn't have your gun out unless it's necessary, because that can escalate the situation. And not only that, it can also create a pretext for, hey, he reached for my gun, so I shot him. Did he really reach for your gun? What are the circumstances? If your gun is holstered, unless you really need it, that may make it much clearer, or at least prevent as many of these situations of, oh, he reached for my gun. So I think that's also a really important thing to have in here.
I think it makes perfect sense. Why was it not in there before? I hope it makes a difference.
I also want to make clear that police are legitimately more afraid right now in modern 2015 US because there are so many guns out there, right? So to some extent, we have to understand why police might be so scared, aside from the obvious disparities with regard to race and class and all of those elements we've discussed. let's realize that if you were a police officer and you knew how many guns were out there, I'd certainly be quite weary of others.
I would too, but we can't allow police to assume that there's a gun and to shoot someone because of that. It needs to be incontrovertible that there was a gun involved.
Let me tell you a little story about 38-year-old Joseph Hayon, who's the former leader of the Brooklyn Tea Party. He once ran for office on a pledge to protect children. That's relevant to the rest of the story, as you can imagine. In 2012, he ran for the state assembly. He said he would, quote, sponsor legislation that would prohibit merchants from selling any obscene literature unless they cater exclusively to adults. Very, very worried about any non-only adult store selling porn, apparently. He has now admitted to possessing and trading child pornography. Prosecutors have charged him with possession of a sexual performance of a child after police seized 5 desktop computers, 2 laptop computers, a tablet, video cameras, and a mobile phone. Hey, why do the child porn guys always seem to have like 10 computers? I mean, I have one computer at home, and then I have a laptop, and then I have one of those little Samsung tablets, which I never even use. It was given to me as a gift, and I've used it maybe 4 times. I can't think of any reason why I would need 10 computers. And it seems the child porn guys always have all these computers, Lewis.
Yeah, I don't know. Multiple viewing angles, multiple things on different screens, backing up your backups. I'd also be curious to know how many external hard drives were confiscated.
Yeah, so the external hard drives are, if you find someone who has 10 external hard drives and they work in a job that has no connection at all to needing to data storage, I question what's going on. Either they really, really like music and they don't want to have any MP3s go missing, or something interesting is going on.
Yeah, I think that's probably a fair assessment. Of course, they could be huge pirates and have every TV show and movie ever as well.
Hayon reportedly admitted to viewing 20 images of child porn on his home computer involving children ranging from as young as 2 years old all the way up to 12. He was also ordered to comply with an order of protection, barring him from having any contact with his 3 sons and 15-month-old daughter. The Brooklyn Tea Party has come out and said he has not been an active member of the Brooklyn Tea Party for almost a year, distancing themselves. Now, I wonder if he pledged to protect children when he was running for state assembly because he knew how dangerous he might be to children.
I really doubt it. But who knows? Some people, like we've talked about, some people have this compulsion and never act on it. Others, who knows what they're capable of.
I'm surprised he didn't use hey, I had all the child porn because I do research on it. Like, remember, I ran for state assembly based on protecting children, and this is all just part of my research.
Research, yeah. We've heard that one before, haven't we, in situations just like this.
I got an email from someone about this who said, David, who really didn't see this coming? All the signs are there. Republican anti-porn crusader running for office on a moral platform with 10 computers. Who didn't see this coming?
Yeah. You know what? I just remembered. Remember the Who guitarist, Townsend? Was it Pete Townsend?
Yeah.
He was busted for this type of thing, and he also said that he was doing research.
Really? I was not familiar with that story.
Yeah, that happened a while ago. I don't know. People seem to forget about that one.
Let's find the possible silver lining here. He is barred from seeing his children now. We don't know whether he is one of those who would only look at child porn and would never take those proclivities to action. We don't know that right now. So the possible silver lining is, if he may have been kind of predisposed to do that but hadn't yet, maybe it's been stopped. Maybe the chance of him abusing his own children has been prevented.
I think, yes. I don't think this would increase the likelihood of that happening. I think it can probably only help.
What do you think the punishment should be? And Lewis has sometimes gotten yelled at on our show for being too strict with what the punishment should be for some crimes, and sometimes has been yelled at for being too lax with what he feels the punishment should be for some crime. If it's Judge Louis B. Motamedi deciding on this, ruling on this, what do you think, based on what this man has done? We don't know that he has ever actually molested any kids All
Right.
we know is he had a whole bunch of child porn on his computer. He's been caught with it. What should be his punishment, legally speaking?
You know, I really can't answer that because I'm torn on this one. I don't know what it should be. Had he actually raped or molested a kid, I would say life in prison. But for this, I really don't know. I can't say because, you know, he did not seem to directly, at least, harm a child.
We don't know whether he took any of these pictures or images or not. Yeah, so it is hard to say. I guess there are some questions there. Send me your thoughts. If this man has never touched a kid, all that has happened is he was found with child porn that he admitted to be his. What should the penalty be? Probation, short jail sentence, long jail sentence, small fine, large fine, can't ever go on the internet again? Let me know.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
It's a pleasure to welcome back to the program Chris Bambery, author of A People's History of Scotland. Chris, we've seen some very interesting results in the UK. We saw the Conservative Party winning its first majority in Parliament in 23 years, also a significant rise in the Scottish National Party, taking 56 of the 59 seats in Scotland. Let's go through these one at a time. First of all, what was known about the potential for the Conservative Party to win a majority? Was that something that was expected? How much of a surprise was it?
That was a surprise. Really, up until the polls closed, every political pundit was saying this was going to be a draw between the centre-right Conservative Party and the centre-left Labour Party. And there would be no overall majority, and therefore there'd have to be some wheeling and dealing to form a coalition government. Previously, the Conservatives have been in a coalition with the Liberal Democrat Party for the last 5 years. They were effectively wiped out in this election. So what happened was clearly the polls did not pick up a significant number of people in England and Wales who were going to vote Conservative, but were not prepared to admit that publicly. Quite an interesting phenomenon that there are people out there who are going to vote for the right wing, but are perhaps ashamed to admit that's what they're going to do. And the Conservatives won this narrow majority, but still an overall majority to form the government on their own with no need for coalition partners. So as you say, for the first time since 1992, there is a majority Conservative government in the United Kingdom.
Is this representative of particular shifts in ideology there? Because, you know, sometimes in the US you can see elections hinge on ideology and platform and issues, or sometimes it's a result of which districts are up for re-election, and it can be more of a sort of logistical victory based on some factors like that. Assess that for us.
Well, I think the biggest feature of the election in England was that the Liberal Democrats, previously with 56 seats, were effectively wiped out, reduced to 8. And the majority of those seats went to Conservatives. Now, the Liberal Democrats are a centrist party with a middle-class base. And by middle class, I don't mean working class. We have a different way of describing it here. But very much a middle-class base. And lots of their voters seem to have switched to the Conservatives, feeling a more natural home. The Labour Party failed in their campaign to win virtually any of their target constituency seats. Here we have geographical seats where the first person, the person who comes first wins outright. First past the post, as it's called. And they failed to win. So they really failed to register in terms of this election, in terms of any gains. They didn't lose in terms of votes, but they just didn't gain any. So nothing much particularly changed except the Liberal Democrats' collapse in England and the fact that that had benefited the Conservatives. And that was enough to give them this narrow majority.
And Chris, are there particular issues for the Liberal Democrats where they've fallen out of favor with the sort of predominant views or opinions there, or is it is that not a factor?
No, there was a very big issue. Back in 2010, the last election, the Liberal Democrats promised to abolish university fees. Here in this country, a scheme had been introduced under a Labour government where you had to pay something like $12,000 a year to go to university. That was very unpopular with young people. The Liberal Democrats were elected on the promise to remove this, and they reneged on that promise. And the bitterness over that has continued. Similarly, many of Liberal Democrat people who voted Liberal Democrat did so because the Liberal Democrats had opposed the 2003 invasion of Iraq, the only one of the major parties to do so. These are people, if you like, of a more leftist liberal persuasion, and they were very alienated by the Liberals then forming a coalition with the right-wing Conservative Party. So there were reasons why people turned their backs on the Liberal Democrats.
So let's talk, speaking of coalitions and fracturing, and now go to the issue of the Scottish National Party. Of course, we interviewed you some time ago, just before the independence referendum in Scotland, which ultimately led to Scotland not becoming independent. We now see this rise in the Scottish National Party. To give us some context first, what is the SNP platform and what might it be closest to here in the United States?
Well, the SNP platform is actually a kind of traditional social democratic platform in terms of European politics. In this country, I think we call it Old Labour, to distinguish from New Labour, Labour as recreated under Tony Blair, which was very much in support of the free market. And what we saw in this election was something quite interesting, because the Scottish National Party, not traditionally a party of the left, but a party which has become slightly more radical, in part because Labour has become more right-wing, it opposed the Iraq war in 2003. It's opposed some of the civil liberties attacks which have taken place, Islamophobic attacks subsequent to the 9/11. They have campaigned on a left-wing rhetoric, a social democratic rhetoric, which Labour, traditionally the dominant party in Scotland, has found very difficult to cope with. The parallel I would use here, it's not an exact parallel, but it's a bit like in Greece, where if you remember, the traditional centre-left party, PASOK, collapsed when faced with a left-wing challenge from Syriza. Now, the SNP is not Syriza, but it just simply could not, the Labour Party could not deal with the fact that here were people a bit to the left of them, challenging them in a left-wing platform, and they struggled throughout this election campaign to do so. The Labour Party were also tarnished by the fact that during the referendum campaign, which, as you say, 45% voted for independence, 55% against, but Labour had fronted up that campaign. Because the Conservatives have got virtually no support in Scotland, Labour were left to carry it in alliance with the Conservatives. And that stuck in the throat of many traditional Labour supporters, including people who had voted no. So faced with a more radical sounding party, sounding more like the Labour Party they used to know, faced with a Labour Party which had been in bed with the Conservatives during the referendum campaign, and the fact that in an attempt to rebuild, the Labour Party had strangely picked a buddy of Tony Blair to be the leader in Scotland, someone who supported the Iraq war, a strong supporter of Israel, a member of the Henry Jackson Foundation, which is the key neoliberal think tank here. He stuck in people's throats, and so they began to drift big time away from Labour. And you had a situation where the SNP took 56 out of 59 parliamentary seats, Westminster parliamentary seats in Scotland. Labour, the Conservatives and Liberal Democrats have got one seat. And this is creating a crisis because as the SNP, which is in the regional government, if you like, the national government in Edinburgh, but it keeps pointing out now it's the dominant force in terms of Westminster, UK parliamentary elections. The government in London has got no mandate in Scotland. David Cameron, the Conservative Prime Minister, has got one MP. The SNP have got 56 MPs. And therefore the argument is, well, Cameron, you cannot really rule in Scotland. You can't tell us what to do. And this has become an important issue. I'll give you one example. Today, the Queen read out the new government's programme. David Cameron writes it for her. She just reads it out. An enormous pageantry. But in the Conservative manifesto, there had been a pledge to remove Britain from the European Human Rights Act. This was set up at the end of the Second World War. Winston Churchill signed it. It was there to guarantee civil liberties across Europe to ensure there was no return to what had happened in the 1930s under Nazism and under fascism. The Cameron pledged to remove it. Nicola Sturgeon, the First Minister in Scotland, said he can't do that. He's got no mandate to take Scotland out of this act. And lo and behold, when the Queen read out this speech today, there are no immediate plans to take Britain out of the European Rights Act, because Cameron knows it's going to open up a constitutional issue that he cannot decide on behalf of the people of Scotland. And this is going to keep cropping up time and time again.
Very, very interesting. The dynamics of what's going on are truly interesting to follow. In some ways, mirroring some elements of what we've seen with electoral politics here in the U.S. over recent years, but in also many ways, a very, very different dynamic and context. Let me remind everybody, we've been speaking with Chris Bambery. The book is A People's History of Scotland. Thanks so much for joining us again, Chris.
Thank you. A pleasure.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Fox and Friends has outdone themselves. They had a tire-changing segment, apparently to try to prove their manhood. It's a really, really weird segment. Scott Brown was guest hosting with Brian Kilmeade. Of course, Elizabeth Hasselbeck was there. And they had retired Navy SEAL Derek Van Orden participate or give them a manhood test. And part one was tying a tie. And part two was changing a tire on a car. So they rented a car from, I believe it was Enterprise Car Rental. And it's just an absolute disaster, Lewis. Now, have you changed car tires before?
I have multiple times. Yeah, it's, you know, I'm used to it, I guess.
Yeah, I've done it a bunch of times. It is a huge pain, especially if you have one of the jacks that doesn't lift the wheel enough, and so that you can't easily take off the lug nuts. You have to keep like removing and putting back in the, what do you call that thing? It's so funny. I've done it a million times. The wrench, right? The lug nut wrench.
Yeah. It's, yeah, I guess a wrench.
That's the biggest pain for me, where you have to like put it in and do a half turn and then it hits the ground. So you have to take it out and do it again. That's the biggest pain, but yes.
Tire iron.
Tire iron. Thank you, Lewis. So you'd think this isn't like a crazy thing to do, but apparently it was. Fox News, during a manhood test, during which you'll hear Elizabeth Hasselbeck play the role of the disabled female driver who just can't do anything to help herself. She needs the men to change the tire for her. They almost damaged the vehicle by letting it slip off of the jack. I mean, it's just a completely abortive attempt at changing a tire. It's pathetic. And apparently, this is news programming. Let's take a look.
And we're going to get some work out of Congress this morning, sir. So you hit the jack.
We're going to change the tire.
We're going to change the tire. Brian, get on the lug.
Don't you want me to do the lugs first?
Yes, Brian, get on the lug.
Oh, wait a second.
Okay.
No, you don't. You got to raise it a little bit first.
Okay, leave her there.
Okay,
So by the way,
Okay, hold what you got.
I had a lot of Twitter followers basically say that Elizabeth can do it better than both of us.
I don't know.
That's right.
I'm just in distress right now. My car is flat tire.
Anytime
You're
now.
just
in distress?
Yes, I'm so happy.
AAA.
These fine men have come to change the
Anytime
tire.
now, Brian. No pressure.
So what's important here that you guys understand is that
Okay, Brian.
being a man is not about what you are. It's about who you are.
Okay, so who are they? Based on what you're saying?
These guys right now happen to be helping someone who's in distress. This is what a man does, not just a male.
I love
Whoa,
it.
watch it, Brian.
Hold what you got. Hold what you got. Let's go ahead and jack it up. Keep
It's
going.
jacked. No, it's jacked. It's
Stop what you're
coming
doing,
off the
Brian.
jack.
Okay, so lug nuts are out.
Cam,
We
watch
have
your
all
feet,
them out?
Elizabeth.
Okay, I'll watch
No,
my
you're not
feet.
going.
No, just
You're
leave
not
it there.
going. You're not going because it's
Go ahead.
Jack's falling.
Stop what you're doing.
Jack's falling?
Go ahead. Let it down again. No. Stop what you're doing.
No, Jack's
Let
falling.
it down.
There's
Jack's
a little bit of
falling.
teamwork going on right
This
here.
is amazing.
Jack's
This is
falling.
great.
Never happened with Jeff Gordon.
It would not.
I bet you would appreciate this, Derek, because
Yes.
there's great communication.
I've never seen that,
between
actually.
Fine gentlemen.
It is
And that's a
fantastic that they're
lesson.
working
Never
together
put your
here.
feet under the car when you're doing this, by the way.
Right, and by the way, this
You
is
like
why I
the
have a
wheel
AAA
and the
card.
tire?
Right.
This is why I have a AAA card. Hi, I'm stuck.
In watching it, it's so obvious that the lug nuts come off so easily that they had been loosened to being like one turn on. I've never seen lug nuts come off so easily. I hope that everyone is really glad that a tiny piece of your cable TV subscription, if you have one, goes to pay for manhood tests, where Elizabeth Hasselbeck plays the damsel in distress on national Fox television. I mean, it is just, what are they doing?
It's odd. It's an odd show, and all I can say is I'm very happy to see these Fox and Friends hosts fail the manhood tests miserably. It really made me happy.
Yeah, I thought Scott Brown was like a supposedly manly man, whatever that means. I don't know, but I remember his supporters saying that when he would drive around in a truck in Massachusetts. I don't know if changing a tire even is one of the one of the things that a manly man does. But if it is, it seems as though Scott Brown has failed.
Yeah, if that equates to manhood, we can have that discussion. But according to Fox and Friends, it does. And so they failed.
I'd also love an explanation as to why it's assumed Elizabeth Hasselbeck would not be able to change the tire on her own if her car was disabled. I mean, I believe that Elizabeth Hasselbeck specifically wouldn't be able to because she just seems generally incompetent with regard to everything she discusses. But the idea that the woman would need men to change the tire is so ridiculous.
Yeah, I think you're right. I don't really think Elizabeth Hasselbeck can do anything. And so...
we have a friend, Lewis, who would get... Remember, Lewis? I know you know who I'm thinking of. He would get flat tires, and he was a manly man by all outward appearances, and he would call his mom when we were like 18 and have her show up and change the tire, which she was able to do in like 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah, hey, you know what? Sometimes you need to ask for help, and, mom knows best, I guess.
Blues guitar legend B.B. King passed away earlier this month in home hospice care in Las Vegas. He was 89. I've always been a huge fan of B.B. King's, Lewis. I know you as well.
Yeah, I saw him perform. I'm glad I got to see that. He's a legend.
No investigation was conducted at the time of his death, and King's attending physician listed the cause of death as multi-infarct dementia, which is caused by a series of small strokes. Two of B.B. King's daughters are now alleging that the blues legend was poisoned to death by his closest associates. King's daughters, Patty King and Karen Williams, made the accusations in separate but essentially identically worded affidavits over the weekend. Quote, "I believe my father was poisoned and that he was administered foreign substances to induce his premature death. I believe my father was murdered." Now, the coroner said preliminary autopsy results don't support the contention, but the daughters say that two of King's associates gave him medication to induce diabetic shock. John Fudenberg, who's the coroner for Clark County, Nevada, told CNN that the initial autopsy result found no evidence to substantiate these allegations, but that it will be 6 to 8 weeks before we have full results. Both of the women, both of his daughters, accused Laverne Toney, King's business manager, and Myron Johnson, his personal assistant, of neglect. Interestingly enough, one of his daughters made similar allegations while B.B. King was still alive. The women say that he was sequestered from all family members the week prior to his death, and that Toney and Johnson were the only people with him. It is so sad when things like this happen. Something similar happening after the death of radio legend Casey Kasem. Elder abuse is a really serious issue, regardless of the specifics, regardless of whether the alleged victim is famous or not. And even Better Call Saul tackling the issue of elder abuse in that series. I don't know ultimately what, if anything, we will find out, but elder abuse is something that is quite prevalent, and a lot of people aren't aware of how serious an issue it is. We don't know the specifics here ultimately.
Agreed. Here in this situation, I mean, the guy was 89 years old. He's had health problems for as long as I can remember. He was not a healthy man. So, I don't know if his daughters are grasping here, but I guess we'll find out in a few weeks.
Yes, there are allegations, of course, that the daughters are grasping, that although at the same time, this is a consistent story that one of the daughters was telling before his death and after his death. We also have no answers as to if it is true, why was no one else allowed to see him during the last week of his life? Very, very sad. A guy who lived a long life, accomplished incredible things in spite of health issues for many, many years. Just very sad, whatever the ultimate outcome is. And hopefully we do get to the truth eventually. Send me your thoughts. Send me your memories about B.B. King. My brother, former TV director Natan, saw him play multiple times in some pretty small venues, I might say, and really enjoyed his music. Just an all-around a great musician, really, really a legend. If you have any thoughts at all about anything we've talked about, call our voicemail number. The number is 219-2-DAVID-P. Here's one voicemail that was left for us.
Hey there, Dr. Pac-Man. It's Joe from Nowlands again. Just saw your video on Rand Paul and his protest of the Patriot Act. I want to congratulate you, actually. I think the fact that you come out in support of the Patriot Act by saying, criticizing Rand Paul for his fun, I think it's actually a step forward there, Dr. Pac-Man, on
Yeah. So a couple things. Number one, I don't have a doctorate. I have a master's degree. So Dr. Pacman is not an accurate name for me. But my questions about the productivity of Rand Paul's 11-hour filibuster, semi-small filibuster of the Patriot Act, was not to imply that I support the Patriot Act. So I think this is an individual, Lewis, who may have heard or watched a piece of our show, but did not understand any of what we said.
Yeah, we were just questioning whether or not the filibuster was going to have any impact or accomplish anything. We are against the Patriot Act, or at least the vast majority of the provisions in it.
On today's bonus show, the NBA story that no one is covering, big changes for Taco Bell, very exciting news for Lewis, that's for sure, and Robert Rodriguez is going to direct a live-action version of Johnny Quest in movie form. All of those stories and more, including previews of our upcoming Indiegogo fundraiser to fund the expansion of the David Pakman Show. You have to be getting that bonus show. Go to davidpakman.com/membership. The new membership sign-up system with instant access notification is now live at davidpakman.com/membership. No more needing to use PayPal or Amazon payments. Unless you want to, then PayPal is still available. Join at davidpakman.com/membership. Speak to you in mere minutes on the bonus show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.